Yan Yu, as a cultivator of immortality, has always opposed the path of ascension and is regarded as an outsider by all immortal sections. So someone seized the opportunity and kicked her, who was resting on the tree, into the crack in the secret realm. Q. What is the feeling of being kicked off a cliff by someone? Yan Yu. Thank you for inviting me. I am still alive, just like a girl who went from being a cultivator to an orphanage with short arms and legs and was abandoned. Now that you know my identity, transfer me 1 million yuan. As long as I return to my own world, I will definitely take you to soar. Comment. Reported, scammers are so rampant these days. Seeing everything, Xiaomu Gu said with heartache, when I make money in the future, I will give you flowers. Yan Yu glanced at the little carrot head beside him and said calmly, you better help me finish my homework first. Later on, Xiaomu Valley was recovered by his family and inherited the family business. When he returned, the orphanage was already in ruins. Until one day, he received a fraudulent text message. I am Yan Yu, the cultivator of immortality. Now I need 1 million to help me return to my world. When I return home smoothly, I will definitely take you to soar and break free from the secular world. Yumagu replied, no need to soar, all my money belongs to you. Yan Yu. 6. This article, also known as, You and I Don't Have Many Connections, Fortunately I Have More Money, and, Ending Single Walk 6, seek support for new articles, keywords of the novel. I unexpectedly lost to money ability without a pop-up window, I unexpectedly lost to money ability. Download the full text of the text, I unexpectedly lost to money ability. Read the latest chapter. Chapter 1, First Arrival in a Different Realm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1, First Arrival in a Different Realm Reborn. Or did the spiritual vortex fool me? Yan Yu lowered his head and saw his small hand covered in wounds, his inner shock magnified infinitely. This is her body, but the size has decreased significantly. I still remember that she was kicked down the crack in the secret realm, where there was a surging vortex of spiritual power. As long as a living creature fell, it would be torn into pieces instantly, and theoretically, there was no chance of survival. Is all of this a trick from the person who kicked her? But the spiritual energy around here is so thin that it can hardly support the illusion. I think she was originally a disciple of the Cloud and Mist sect, a rising star in the cultivation world. As she watched as she was about to reach the position of sect elder, her master suddenly ascended and gave a death order, urging her to spare no effort to prevent the promotion of the cultivator. In order to fulfill her master's mission, she quickly became the public enemy of the cultivation world with her own strength, becoming a representative of deviating from the norm. And that inexperienced junior brother doesn't know where to cultivate his mind and body. Walking by the river often keeps your shoes wet. When she tried to prevent a sect disciple from being promoted, she bravely broke through the formation and openly provoked the elder protector. During the fight, she accidentally damaged several talented treasures and was chased all the way to Yaoshan. She successfully escaped by taking advantage of the terrain of Yaoshan. However, curiosity kills cats. She heard that the secret realm crack that could devour all things was located on the top of Mount Yao, and soon she appeared at the edge of the crack. Just as she peeked into the abyss, she keenly sensed a spiritual attack and lightly jumped up with her toes. Unexpectedly, the person kicked her buttocks. His spiritual power was swallowed up by the cracks, and Yan Yu had no way to save himself, so he fell into the secret realm cracks. She was still lamenting the ups and downs of the first half of her life, and a few slight coughs pulled her back to reality. A boy about her age lay on his side, his cough filled with pain. Yan Yu went over and lightly poked his arm, which revealed the red rope on his wrist. This thing looks a bit familiar. Before I could remember, 2 men came in from outside. The sunlight shone in, and Yan Yu realized that he was in a cage surrounded by some dilapidated things. The light flashed by in an instant, and the 2 of them entered and pressed a certain switch. Several dim lights lit up in the empty room. Boss, this girl is awake. The man with a big and round waist glanced at Yan Yu, took off the cigarette from his mouth, and said, "Don't worry about her, make a phone call first." The skinny monkey man cleared his throat and after a while, fiercely turned to the phone and said, "Tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, you can't forget 10 million words. If you come alone and dare to report to the police, I will throw your son into the sea." Yan Yu listened openly, but the cultural differences of the times were too great, and the information she could extract was limited. The boy lying on the ground should have been kidnapped. 10 million is gold, silver, or spirit stones. Big brother, what about this girl? The fat man replied in a low voice, "I have already contacted the buyer. After the kidnapping scene tomorrow is completed and we get 10 million yuan, let's sell them both tonight." The skinny monkey nodded and turned to look at the cage, meeting Yan Yu's gaze in the air. He asked in confusion, "Big brother, why isn't this girl crying and not making a scene?" After speaking, he remembered some rumors and asked with uncertainty, "They all say there are monsters in Yaoshan, but this girl doesn't know." The fat man said sternly and inwardly, "What nonsense. Big brother," the skinny monkey lowered his voice. "My milk said that after the abandoned doll dies, the resentment will turn into a red rope. Look at that girl's wrist, that red rope doesn't seem to be stained with blood." His voice was filled with fear. "It's so red, there must be a lot of resentment. It's over." The fat man kicked him mercilessly and said, "Shut up your mother, I don't believe this. Even if it's a kid, I will sell it to her." As soon as he finished speaking, a few crow calls suddenly rang out from outside, and the light bulb deep inside the house exploded without warning. "Big brother," the skinny monkey trembled. The fat man frowned. "This girl should be an abandoned fool. Don't frighten yourself, his mother, I'll get a light bulb." "Yan, Xiaogui, fool, you said that she was really a fan of Q, and she witnessed the rumor firsthand. You go take a look at that boy, drink some water, don't let him die." The fat man arranged and left the room. The skinny monkey refused fruitlessness and walked over with a bottle of water from the ground, but the gap in the cage was too small to fill, so he trembled and opened the chain. His vigilant appearance made Yan Yu self-doubt, and she hasn't done anything since waking up. There is a hint that scares itself, and the skinny monkey trembles as it feeds the boy water. Yan Yu walked silently to his side, intending to ease the atmosphere, but just as he said hello, he fell to the ground as if he had seen a ghost, then struggled to get up and ran out shouting at the monster. "I ran out of the cage and didn't forget to fasten the chain." Yan Yu is very speechless. The boy on the ground was awakened by the roar, and his arms struggled to support his upper body, grabbing the nearby water bottle and drinking it all in one gulp. "Drink slowly." As the water bottle bottomed out, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and leaned weakly against the railing. He looked up at Yan Yu and asked weakly, "Who are you?" Yan Yu shrugged and said, "It's obvious, your fellow inmate." Upon hearing this, Yu Magu stopped talking, closed his eyes to cache his stamina, and calculated the way to escape from here. The surroundings quieted down, and Yan Yu sat cross-legged, trying to establish a connection with the thin spiritual energy around him. However, this behavior was like throwing a stone into the sea, causing no waves. She turned to seek strength from herself, and soon a wave of enthusiasm surged in Dantian. Yan Yu could feel the spiritual power wandering along the tendons and veins. However, before the spiritual power could run for half a week, Yan Yu suddenly felt a piercing pain in his heart, and sweat quickly seeped out from his back. The cycle of spiritual power has already begun, and she doesn't want to give up. When the heart was covered by spiritual power and gradually seeped in, a heart-wrenching pain hit like a mountain and sea, and chi and blood surged up. Every breath she took was a test of life and death. The pain was unbearable. Yan Yu lost her breath, and the spiritual energy around her heart disappeared instantly. She fell to the ground in pain and curled up. This feeling reminded her of the pain of her master washing her marrow when she first started. Does it mean that after the body shrinks, the muscles and veins of the whole body return to their initial state? But that's not right. Only when spiritual power reaches near the heart can this suffocating pain occur. She struggled to sit up with her hands propped up, breathing in fresh air in a hurry, pondering the reason in her heart. The memories of falling into the cracks of the secret realm suddenly came to her mind, as if she was in a void, seeing her master's spirit. Yumagu was awakened again, and when he opened his eyes, he saw Yen Yu's face pale, sweating profusely, completely different from what it was a minute ago. "What's wrong with you?" Yen Yu looked over at the sound and shook his head, saying forcefully, "It's okay." After a moment of silence, Yumagu said indifferently, "I suggest you save your energy and wait until you run away. If you can't run along the way, I won't save you." End of this chapter. Chapter 2, Escaping the Dilemma. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2, Escaping the Dilemma. Run west from here. There is a public phone in the village behind the forest. Call the police. Although he didn't understand the meaning of the words public phone and alarm, Yen Yu was somewhat surprised that the boy could remain calm and come up with a solution in this situation. Yumagu stood up and observed the chain on the door, asking, "Can you pry the lock?" She didn't have time to answer, and the chubby and skinny group walked in one by one, with the skinny monkey's eyes still filled with fear. The fat man walked over to the cage and wanted to pull Yen Yu over, but his arms were too thick. He took out the key from his pocket to unlock and ordered, "Take down the red rope for me." Yen Yu shook his head and refused. The chubby guy was about to take action, and Yumagu on the side ran into him with all his might. Yen Yu took advantage of his unstable figure and focused all his strength on sweeping his right leg horizontally. The fat man fell to the ground with a loud bang. She quickly stepped on the right side of the fat man with quick eyes and hands, bending down as if to remove his arm. The fat man reacted quickly and lifted his foot to kick her away. The back hit the cage, causing pain that affected the internal organs, and Yen Yu coughed violently. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the fat man went out and locked the cage. His mother, "Don't give them any food or water today." The skinny monkey replied, "Yes, big brother." After the person left, Yen Yu spread out his palm and casually said, "I don't know how to pry a lock, but I have a key." Outside, the fat man walked ahead angrily. Just as he took a step, the skinny monkey collided with him. "You are his mother blind. I didn't let you, forget it." The fat man was half angry and didn't want to say any more. He stepped into the car, and the thin monkey followed. The atmosphere inside the car remained silent for a moment, and then suddenly there was a clang outside. The skinny monkey was startled and immediately tightened its nerves. The fat man sneered, "You're really useless. 2 dolls scared you so much." After a moment, he suddenly touched his pocket, which was empty. Key. At this time, Yen Yu and his wife had reached the edge of the forest. Just now, they accidentally knocked down the shovel beside the wall. Unexpectedly, the fat and thin combination did not respond, giving them more time to escape. But when Yumagu looked desperate holding the broken phone line, it goes without saying that Yen Yu also felt that things were not going well. "I can only think of a solution on my own." She pulled Yumagu out from behind the village, where the chubby and skinny duo were waiting. "I'll steer them away, you go take care of that big guy." Yen Yu pointed to the van and said, then ran out without giving Yumagu a chance to hesitate. She showed her escape speed when being chased by the sect, but her current physical condition is really poor, and she didn't notice falling. When the thin monkey running ahead was about to catch her, the red line on Yen Yu's wrist seemed to have vitality, automatically falling off and extending infinitely. The skinny monkey was stunned, then the red rope flew towards him. He ran away, but the chubby man didn't believe it and wanted to pull it down, but he was bound by it. The engine sounded, and Yumagu drove around in a few circles before struggling to stop next to Yen Yu. Yen Yu fell into a coma after getting on the car. "When I open my eyes again, I have arrived at the police station that Yumagu mentioned. The chubby and skinny combination was escorted in, and the red string returned to its wrist. Lu Dui, there is no information about this girl in the database. There is also no record in the missing child report. The boy was kidnapped, and when we called, his family immediately confirmed that he was dead. Now the authorities are asking us to finalize the case quickly, and the child will be sent to the welfare home. Lu team sternly refused, no way. Lu, this is just a remote county town, let's follow the requirements above. Isn't sister.in.law going to have a baby soon? It's better to do less. Also, those two kidnappers seem to have a nerve problem and keep saying, red rope is a ghost. Yen Yu listened to the conversation between the two without missing a word. When she stood in front of the welfare home with Yumagu, she understood that Lu's team had not been able to uphold justice to the end. The police left and the two became completely orphans. Yen Yu has long been accustomed to it. She has always been familiar with talking to children, and Yumagu sits silently on the side. When she was studying the borrowed book, she heard a quarrel and turned to see a little girl lying in front of Mugu. Yen Yu pushed over with a book in his arms and asked, "What's wrong?" Yumagu blushed and remained silent, while the little girl cried and said he had hit someone. Regardless of whether the children around him saw or not, they all became witnesses at this moment, accusing Mugu of being an orphan. Yumagu clenched his fists tightly, his eyes turning red. He wanted to refute and say no, but was afraid that tears would come down when he opened his mouth. Yen Yu lifted the girl on the ground and asked, "Did he push you?" To be honest. The serious Yen Yu on her face made the girl feel a bit scared. After a moment of silence, she stuttered and said, I dropped it myself, but I want to eat his snacks and he won't give it." Yumagu was like a stubborn lion, roaring angrily, "Why should I give it to you?" The girl cried even harder with a loud cry. Seeing this, the boy next to him was filled with righteous indignation. "They came to grab our toys and snacks. They are bad kids, beat them away." The dispute came too quickly, and Yumagu started pushing down a boy who was pulling his collar, while the others rushed forward. The girls came towards Yen Yu, either pulling their hair or clothes. At the moment when Yen Yu hesitated whether to fight back, he was already adorned with countless decorations. Yumagu was also pushed to the ground, and the boys punched and kicked him. At this moment, a strong male voice came. "What are you doing?" Upon hearing this sound, the children were like ants exploding their nests, quickly leaving the scene and standing in a distant line. Yen Yu looked up and saw an old man with glasses and wrinkles on his face coming over. He walked up to the other children and scolded them, ordering them to go back to the house to study. Then he walked over and changed his serious expression, saying kindly, "I'm the dean here. Are you two okay?" He bent down to pick up the book on the ground and handed it to Yen Yu, praising, "I love learning at such a young age and am a talented person. Welcome to your new home. If you have anything, you can come to me or find a caregiver." "Thank you." Yen Yu finished speaking and pulled Yumagu into the house without saying a word. Without anyone around, she wondered, "How do you feel that this dean is a bit strange? Why did you help me just now?" Yumagu asked with a listless expression. Yen Yu's mind froze for a moment and he replied, "If you want to help, you can help. At least we have a close relationship." Upon hearing this, Yumagu took out a newly served snack biscuit from his pocket and said, "Here you are, eat it." "I have it." At a young age, Yumagu has already shown a domineering demeanor. "Eat." Yen Yu's affection was hard to resist, and as soon as he accepted a small snack in Mugu, he left on his own. She didn't keep up and was completely immersed in doubts about the dean. If the dean is really as kind and amiable as he appears, the children should stop moving when he says the first sentence, instead of standing in an orderly formation without saying a word, and the fear on some children's faces is obvious. However, without evidence, Yen Yu decided to find a quiet place to read first. Yumagu ran alone to the yard lawn, squatting down to search for something. End of this chapter. Chapter 3, Blazing Rope. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3, Blazing Rope. The two people who were isolated during dinner sat side by side at the end of the long table, and when it was their turn, there were hardly any dishes left. Yenyu felt that her body was still in a state of being in a valley. Looking at the thin and weak body of the child next to her, she took the initiative to push the food over. I didn't expect that after she finished reading, Yumagu was still waiting for her on the side. Just thinking about it, the boy had just gone through an ordeal and finally escaped to a new place. Other children around him were still isolated and excluded, subconsciously accompanied by a relatively familiar Yenyu, which was very reasonable. She jumped off the chair, her long legs from the past turning into short legs today. The sea of consciousness, which was once filled with spiritual power, is now empty, and her mood is very complicated. The place where the welfare home sleeps is a large dormitory, with beds adjacent to each other and separate rooms for men and women. After entering the female dormitory, Yenyu took out all the snacks for lunch and shared them. In just a few words, she knew that anyone who didn't listen to the director would disappear. Several had already disappeared, but there had never been a police officer to manage them. Planting seeds of doubt in his heart, Yenyu became even more vigilant towards the dean. After turning off the light, she lightly climbed over the wall and found a quiet and uninhabited place to practice cross-legged. Time passed quickly, and after dawn, the children began to move freely in the yard. Yenyugan walked over. The act of sharing snacks last night caused the girls to gather around her, causing Yumagu's pace to stop. He looked at Yenyu, who was surrounded like a heavy star holding the moon, with a drooping brow and a faint coldness in his eyes. In a moment, he turned around and entered the room, taking out a glass bottle from under his pillow. Inside was a bug caught on the lawn yesterday. After distributing snacks at noon, he took a bag of potato chips and went to find Yenyu, who was reading a book. "Can you help me give this bag of potato chips to the girl who fell yesterday?" She looked up and asked, "Why don't you give it yourself?" Yumagu hesitated and spoke, and Yenyu thought he was shy. With a smile in his eyes, he said, "Okay, I promise to complete the task." He looked up in surprise and looked at Yenyu, feeling a bit guilty. He raised his hand to retrieve the potato chips, but was unsuccessful. "I won't give it any more," Yumagu frowned and said. Yenyu hid the potato chips behind her and teased. "There is no room for regret for the water spilled from the gift. This is what you insist on giving." Yumagu finished speaking and left. Yenyu felt inexplicable. Later, she called the little girl from yesterday and took out the potato chips. "Is this for me?" Yenyu nodded and watched as the girl slowly tore open the packaging. She added, "You fell yesterday, this is Yumagu." Ah. At the moment the packaging bag was opened, a black bug the size of a fingernail quickly climbed onto the back of the girl's hand. Yenyu quickly patted off the potato chips and picked out the insects with a book. The girl was so frightened that she crouched on the ground and cried loudly. Before Yenyu could say anything behind her, several flower protectors gathered around her again. A muscular boy comforted Xiao Yi for a long time and decided to solve the problem from the source. He stood up, his eyes filled with hatred, and without hesitation, he punched Yenyu. Yenyu retreated with his left foot and easily dodged the punch. Immediately lift up the right hand, borrowing a book to cover the boy's arm. The boy turned around and was about to kick, when a sudden figure threw him to the ground. Yenyumu stared blankly at Yumagu sitting on Xiaopeng's body, as he was about to hit someone with a punch. He quickly stopped him. "Wait." She pulled Yumagu aside. The chubby boy stood up with a fierce gaze and said, "If you scare Xiaoyi, you should be beaten." Unexpectedly, the current child has rich emotions and a hot temper. Yenyu apologized and wanted to take responsibility for this mistake to calm things down. Unexpectedly, Yumagu didn't play cards according to common sense and stood up to say, "I let the insects go, I hate you." As soon as Xiaopang heard this, he wanted to show his strength again. Xiaoyi, who had been crying for a while, grabbed him and sobbed, saying, "I believe Yumagu didn't mean to." "I did it on purpose," Yumagu said. Even though he had steps to climb, Yu quickly grabbed the absent-minded child and said, "He really didn't mean it, and neither did I." Xiaoyi's tearful eyes swayed, but she still smiled at Mugu, feeling wronged and enduring. Pulling Xiaopang and leading a group of flower protection envoys, they left. There was no one else around, and Yan Yugang wanted to ask the reason. Yumagu rebelled and said, "It was you who insisted on sending it." She was speechless with a harsh remark. Yumagu's gaze was indifferent and heartless. "I hate them. Then just ignore me." Yumagu looked straight at Yan Yu and said softly, "But you still play with them." Yan Yu. "I don't hate them," she continued as Yumagu remained silent. "And I need their help now. The dean has a problem and needs to keep a low profile before being unable to protect himself. Do not put yourself in danger unless absolutely necessary, do you understand? Are we still friends?" Yumagu replied, "That's not what he asked." Thinking that the child was really jumping off, Yan Yu nodded. "I know now, I won't openly trouble them anymore." Yan Yu showed a childish expression, pondering carefully but feeling that it was not right. "What did you say?" Yumagu didn't give her a chance to ask further questions and instead asked, "What book did you read?" Seeing this, Yan Yu was too lazy to get entangled and then flipped through the book Natural Science and Society, in his hand. The two of them sat in the pavilion, Yan Yu immersed in the ocean of knowledge, and Yumagu sat quietly with her, occasionally saying things that were not mentioned in books. "Have you learned all of these?" Yumagu nodded. Yan Yu closed his book and turned his head, asking, "Do you know about spiritual energy?" Yumagu lowered his head for a moment and said, "My dad said that some cultural relics unearthed from ancient tombs contain spiritual energy, which can change feng shui." Her eyes lit up and she said, "Do you know where these things are?" Yumagu shook his head and paused for a moment, saying, "I have it at home, but..." Accidentally mentioning a sad matter, Yan Yu quickly changed the topic and said, "I'll tell you quietly, I'm already 118 years old." Yumagu reacted quickly and said, "Then I'm 218 years old." Seeing him regain his innocent appearance, Yan Yu's eyes were filled with a smile. Night arrived as promised, and Yan Yu was indeed isolated again. But she didn't pay much attention either. The next day before dawn, she climbed over the wall to exercise. When the sky lit up, a slightly bitter temple incense mixed with a faint sour smell drifted in. Yan Yu's nose tip moved slightly and changed course. Putua Temple. Yan Yu looked up at the lintel, the huge temple, the Buddha statues and pillars spotless. The monk, wearing a grey Taoist robe and holding a broom, stood by the pillar, his spiritual power surging around him almost comparable to Yan Yu's peak period. "Yan Yu. This way, please." The monk directly called out her name, and Yan Yu pondered, silently following his footsteps out of the back door of the temple. "The source of the sour odor is from the Bodhi tree in front of us. The closer you get, the stronger the spiritual energy around you, and the gathering spirit formation is running under the tree roots." Yan Yu tentatively asked, "Master of Talismans?" The monk nodded and said, "Poor monk Putuo. You can come here to practice in the future. The shackles in your heart originate from your master, and when the time is ripe, they will be lifted. Master Fu is capable of understanding both ancient and modern times, but cannot reveal secrets. Most of the time, he can only silently watch all things in the world develop in either right or wrong directions. Taking materials and arranging formations is their specialty." Yan Yu was in a difficult situation, and upon hearing this, he nodded and bowed, "Thank you, master. Just call me Putuo." The monk looked at Yan Yu's wrist and said, "The blazing fire rope is transformed by the ancient auspicious beast phoenix blood, which can absorb spiritual energy independently. The darker the color, the greater the power." Yan Yu lowered his head to look at the red rope in his eyes, and then looked up again, no longer seeing the monk's footsteps. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Pain of Hard Pen Calligraphy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The pain of hard pen calligraphy. An hour had passed since returning to the welfare home, and Yan Yu leapt up, stepping on the focal point and flipping over, landing perfectly. As soon as he turned around, he saw Yumagu standing there. Yan Yu took a half step back and said, "You scared me. What are you doing here?" Yumagu took out the things behind him and said, "Your backpack. The dean said you can go to school tomorrow." "School bag. School." Yan Yu took the empty backpack and said thank you before entering the room first. Many children in the hall were holding backpacks and cheering, some of whom were eager to stuff things into their backs with a certain appearance. A few days later, when the teacher announced that she had officially become a member of the biennial class, Yan Yu was still a bit shocked in her heart. There was no problem with learning, but pen writing became Yan Yu's black history. She humbly submitted the calligraphy book. The teacher said with resentment, "Your strokes are either weak or strong enough to scratch the paper. Have you practiced them well?" After finishing speaking, class was just over, and Yan Yu watched as the teacher left helplessly and spread out on the table. Back in the day, her calligraphy was powerful and graceful, with a graceful and graceful style. "I didn't expect to be defeated by hard pen calligraphy today." Yumagu, who was sitting in the front row, turned to look at the calligraphy book. Yan Yu took a step and said, "I know it's very ugly, don't read it." "I have studied calligraphy," Yumagu said. "I can accompany you to practice calligraphy." Yan Yu suddenly came to his senses and said, "Really?" As soon as she finished speaking, Lin Yi, a girl from the same welfare institution, walked over and said softly, "Yumagu, can I join?" "No," Yumagu replied coldly, "but, if you want to learn, you can go practice calligraphy." Yumagu interrupted her and then said to Yan Yu, "I'll accompany you to practice calligraphy after school today." Having been wandering the earth for so many days, Yan Yu knows that this behavior is called a double standard. Don't say, the feeling of being favored by others is really good, even though the other person is a child. Lin Yihong's eyes were red, and before leaving, she looked at Yan Yu with a dissatisfied expression in her eyes. During his lunch break, Yan Yu originally wanted to discuss calligraphy with Yumagu, but as soon as he finished class, he was called out. The other classmates finished their meal and returned to the classroom, but he hasn't returned yet. Yan Yu stood up to buy a bottle of water and met Yumagu at the door. "Have you eaten yet?" Yumagu shook his head and Yan Yu said, "I'll go buy a bottle of water." "Let's go together." The two of them went to the cafeteria side by side. Yan Yu endured it for a while before finally reaching out to smooth out Yumagu's chicken coop-like hair and saying, "Are you going to act wild on the lawn?" Seeing him not answering, Yan Yu stopped asking further questions. After school, a small number of students stayed on duty, while Yan Yu sat in his seat practicing calligraphy. As soon as he started writing, he was stopped. "No wonder your handwriting is ugly, your pen-holding technique is incorrect." Yan Yu explained, "I see you all doing this. Keep your 5 fingers together, place the pen on the first phalanx of your middle finger, clip the first 2 fingers together, and use the back 2 fingers to support your middle finger. That's it." Yan Yu tried to write a word, "I don't feel as comfortable writing as I do." "Not right." Yumagu directly helped her adjust, the pen should lean against the tiger's mouth. The classmates who were cleaning on the side suddenly started to cheer, and the class was filled with the voices of women. Yumagu quickly let go of Yan Yu's hand, but Yan Yu felt frustrated. She was so useless that she couldn't even take a pen. The two of them were busy with their own tasks, but the sound of "wow doll" in the class kept going, and from time to time, smiling eyes drifted over. Yan Yu didn't understand what these children were doing, and being watched for a long time inevitably made her feel a bit annoyed. She looked up at the few on-duty students and asked expressionlessly, "Are you performing to me? What is listening to the sound of frogs?" The classroom quickly quieted down, and after practicing several pages of calligraphy, Yan Yu gradually found a feeling. In the following days, I accompanied Yan Yu to practice calligraphy in Mu Valley. After finding the correct method, Yan Yu's hard handwriting skills improved by leaps and bounds within a week. On Friday, just after school, Yan Yu held his backpack and asked with a smile, "I have something to do today. Can we practice again on Monday?" Yumagu watched her dressed up and said calmly for a moment, "Whatever. I'll leave first, be careful on your way back." Yan Yu left quickly, and in an orderly manner, Yumagu packed his backpack and silently walked back to the welfare home. Returning to the dormitory, no boys came to talk to him. He found a table and finished his homework stroke by stroke, then sat alone by the window until he turned off the lights and went to sleep. The next morning, he went to the edge of the wall to wait, but there were still no familiar people waiting. Yan Yu stayed under the tree in the temple all weekend, and the monk Putua taught a cultivation method that could bypass the heart, but the speed of cultivation would become very slow. Yan Yu didn't care and absorbed the spiritual energy around him, forgetting to sleep and eat. Therefore, when she arrived at school on Monday and found out that she had forgotten to do her homework, she began a busy morning in a state of anxiety. Upon entering the gate, Yumagu saw Yan Yu buried in his studies. He walked over and glanced at him before sitting quietly. After seeing him, Yan Yu decisively took out his excerpt assignment. She poked Yumagu and as he turned around to hand over the homework, she innocently said, "Please, please." I intended to refuse, but when it came to the mouth, Mugu still nodded. Elementary school homework has the most Chinese language excerpts, and Yan Yu just finished other assignments in Mugu. "Thank you, let's finish school today." Before Yan Yu could finish speaking, Yumagu said, "I have something to do this afternoon." "Ah." Yan Yu nodded, "Then we can meet tomorrow." "I have something to do tomorrow, too." Yan Yu didn't care and said happily, "Okay, let's talk when you have time." Yumagu didn't answer and turned around. On Monday, Yan Yu was responsible for hygiene. As soon as school was over, she didn't have time to say hello, and Yumagu's figure was no longer in the classroom. After cleaning, a few classmates said goodbye to the school gate with a smile. The welfare home is some distance away from here, and Yan Yu, who is already familiar with public transportation, is waiting for the bus. The peak period after school has passed, and now there are a few people scattered outside the school gate. Yan Yu hummed a song and stared bored at the bus stop sign. Through the gap of the station sign, she saw a group of children wearing school uniforms walking by. Yan Yu frowned, as if she had seen Yumagu. "I'm not sure, take a look again." She poked her head and indeed saw Yumagu being pushed forward among the group of students. After a moment of contemplation, Yan Yu shouted, "You Mu Valley." The group of students turned around and Yan Yu continued to ask, "Are we going together?" Not far away, Yan Yu heard Yumagu say, "Don't worry about me." Okay, Yan Yu withdrew his head and continued to stare at the bus stop in a daze. Yumagu, who was kidnapped, was forced to walk towards an unsupervised alley. The boy next to him occasionally punched his arm and cursed profusely. Small groups with an average age of only 10 years old are each arrogant and domineering. At the end of the alley, Yumagu was kicked to the ground. He picked up his backpack and struggled to get up, but to no avail. A boy came over and swung his arm at him, while someone picked up a stone and threw it at him. Yumagu raised his backpack to protect his head. End of this chapter. Chapter 5, Encountering Magic Chi by Chance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5, Encountering Magic Chi by Chance. A scream sounded, but the stone did not fall on him, and the boy who was punching had no follow-up. Yumagu opened his eyes, his familiar school uniform obscuring the light in front of him. Yan Yu bent down to support him and said, if everyone says you're being kidnapped, just blink. Your eyes are blinking like that, isn't it obvious? The two stood side by side, facing 7 or 8 arrogant boys. The male leader, who is the tallest and the strongest in physique, said fiercely, if you recognize me, hurry up and leave. I'm only looking for Yumu Valley today. Yan Yu didn't say much, like an arrow rushing out of the string, grabbing a boy's arm with her right hand and sweeping his leg. After knocking down one, she turned around and took a detour behind the other, lifting her foot and kicking his calf. The other boys reacted and all rushed forward, their disorganized playing style seeming playful in Yan Yu's eyes. Even if both sides have similar figures, she can easily defeat a group of boys. From beginning to end, the fiery rope on the wrist remained quiet. You dare to wander the world with such little skill. Yan Yu turned around and asked, it's not because of these people that you're acting wild on the lawn, is it? Watching the small group that bullied him arrogantly a few minutes ago show signs of being 7 or 8 crooked, with a few still crying to find their mother, Yumagu chose to remain silent. You wait. The boy led by him clenched his fists tightly, and even after speaking harshly, he ran away without caring. The other boys followed closely behind. Yan Yu picked up his backpack on the ground and said with ease, how about this? You help me with my homework every day, I'm responsible for protecting you, and I'll teach you a few self-protection techniques. How about that? Yumagu shook his head and said, not really. Yan Yu tasted the benefits of cultivation and couldn't wait to arrange the homework that hindered her. Seeing that Mugu did not agree, she continued, they are numerous and powerful. I will protect you, and you can focus on your studies without any distractions. Can you always protect me? Upon hearing the play, Yan Yu spoke faster than his brain and said, of course you can. I can help you write it. Yumagu nodded as he didn't give her a chance to repent. Persuasion succeeded, and Yan Yu smiled at the corners of his mouth. She seemed to have seen the practice of neglecting sleep and food every night, as if seeing the sea of consciousness once again full of spiritual power, and as if seeing the unobstructed path home. What are you laughing at? Yan Yu snapped back and said, ah. It's nothing, let's go. With the help of Yumagu, Yan Yu would spare time to practice every night. Occasionally, she would try to drive her heart during the cycle of spiritual power, even though her heart would always be twisted like a knife. But she still doesn't slack off. Every morning, she would take Yumagu for a morning run to exercise. Along the way, the two of them chatted and laughed, but only Yan Yu knew about the existence of Putua Temple. During this period, the delinquent youth gang continued to come and cause trouble, but were all solved by Yan Yu with an absolute advantage. The only thing that puzzled her was Lin Yi's questioning. Are you Yumagu's girlfriend? Yan Yumu was stunned. If I remember correctly, my girlfriend should be my future partner. Do children nowadays have such foresight? Yan Yu tried to communicate, you are still young, you should focus on learning and cultivation. Just say it's not. Yan Yu shook her head and sighed inwardly at Lin Yi's early maturity. She had already considered so far at the age of only 8. Is he your most important person? Those who cultivate immortals prioritize the great way. Lin Yi didn't understand what Yan Yu was saying, but when she shook her head, she was clearly happy and asked, can you help me make an appointment with Yumagu? Yan Yu refused, no, you can go find him yourself. After finishing speaking, she planned to leave and suddenly felt a strong wave of spiritual energy. Looking up, she saw Lin Yi taking out a red rope and wearing a jade hanging around her neck. What is this? Lin Yi cautiously retreated and covered Yu with her hand, saying, it's nothing. Seeing this, Yan Yu restrained his curiosity and turned around to leave. The spiritual energy contained on that piece of jade is purer than that in the spiritual formation under the Bodhi tree. With the help of this spiritual energy and the accumulation in her body in the past few days, she may be able to break through the shackles of her heart in one fell swoop, so that she can quickly cultivate to the best state and pass through the cracks in the secret realm. Yan Yu was very tempted. After hesitating for a few days, she finally agreed to help Lin Yue with Mu Gu in exchange for a 1-day usage period of the jade. But as soon as her request was finished, it was mercilessly refuted by Yu Gu. I don't want to go. Yan Yu was conflicted in his heart, but he still said, please, this time, maybe that piece of jade can save my life. Don't you think you're being selfish like this? After Yu Gu finished speaking, he left. Yan Yu stood in place and took a deep breath, his brows furrowed together, his heart very complicated. Since learning that Yan Yu had nothing to do with Yu Gu, Lin Yi took the initiative to talk to him every day. Whenever this happened, Yan Yu couldn't help but look at the two of them, or more precisely, at the jade around Lin Yi's neck. Have you also been abandoned? The low and disappointed voice beside Yan Yu brought her back to her senses. Xiao Pang, who had been fighting with her before, sat down beside her dejected and pointed to the two people not far away, saying, Yumagu no longer plays with you, and Xiaoyi no longer plays with me. We have both been abandoned. Yan Yu was very irritable and spoke in a very aggressive tone, if you don't study hard, you'll just think about what you have. So why are you staring at Yumagu? I didn't look at him, Yan Yu explained and realized that the frequency of explaining to others has been increasing in recent days, which is not her personality. So he simply remained silent and climbed over the wall to the temple on Saturday to continue his cultivation. It's strange to say that Yan Yu hasn't encountered him since seeing Putua that time. I thought it was the same this time, but she walked under the tree and Putua was cleaning the fallen leaves. Here we go. Yan Yu nodded and began practicing with his legs crossed. Putua calmly said, an unstable mind can easily lead to madness. Yan Yu opened his eyes, and the struggle in his heart was extremely evident at this moment. In the past, Yan Yu had no need to worry about a piece of jade. The current situation forces her to go back quickly, but once the spiritual energy on the jade dissipates, the jade will also crack along with it. Lin Yi said that it was left by her parents, and Yan Yu did not want to destroy the objects that others had hoped for, let alone that the other person was still a child. She is now eager to cultivate, and every decision is made from a personal perspective. Even if Mu Gu did not refuse to help her, these causes and effects will turn into lightning and be added to her in the future when crossing the calamity. Yan Yu sighed and said, when can I go back? Putua put down his broom and stroked the Bodhi tree, saying, once you come, be at ease. All things have their own laws. Soon you will know how to go. It's almost time today, please go back. Yan Yu. I just came. Before the words could be finished, Putua waved his robe and the surrounding scenery quickly regressed. Upon returning to the divine, Yan Yu had already stood outside the temple door. She returned with inner doubts and confusion. Practice emphasizes calmness and composure, but these days she has been too restless, relying on past experiences to feel that she can easily return to the peak. Putua is right, there must be a cause for all things, and when they come, they will be in peace. Just like the shackles on the heart, they will naturally be untied when the time comes. She walked thoughtfully to the edge of the forest and suddenly sensed a wave of energy, which was magic energy. End of this chapter. Chapter 6, Fighting Against Magic Chi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6, Fighting Against Magic Chi. Yan Yu followed this aura and soon saw a black mist rushing through the woods. It looks like a newly formed magic energy, unable to even transform. Nevertheless, with Yan Yu's current ability to confront this demonic energy, the chances of winning are not very high. She secretly mobilized her spiritual power inside her body, circling behind her diagonally, ready to be defeated in one fell swoop. A light blue spiritual power ball gathered in his palm, and Yan Yu aimed at the hidden magic heart under the magic energy, throwing a shot put to throw the spiritual power ball out. Almost at the same time, the laughter and joy of passers-by came from outside the forest, and the demonic energy flew directly towards the direction of the sound source. Yan Yu's attack slowed down a step, leaving only black-brown marks on the tree trunk, and was turned away by the stopping magic energy. Although it had no eyes, Yenyu felt that the clever gaze with it was successful at this moment. The formation of demonic energy takes decades or even hundreds of years, and it only takes a moment to anger it. Yenyu watched helplessly as the demonic energy around it surged, and a black mist that was the size of a reef instantly rose to the size of his head. She backed her hands behind her and took a few steps back, her palms gathering strength again. At the moment when the demonic energy rushed in, Yenyu's wrists overlapped with his palms, forming a spiritual barrier in front of him in an instant. The fierce impact of the magic energy made her continue to retreat, leaving 2 footprints and scratches on the ground. There was no spiritual energy to mobilize around, and the spiritual energy stored in Yenyu's body after several days of cultivation flowed outward like water from a large river. In such a passive state, it is very likely that I will have to directly confess here. The impact of the demonic energy caused Yenyu to retreat to the tree trunk, and the spiritual barrier had already cracked. She simply withdrew her spiritual energy in a flash, and the demonic energy collided with the tree behind her, then attacked her again. Yenyu ran and dodged, with the demonic energy chasing relentlessly behind him. She pulled out the fiery rope from her wrist, and the 10-centimeter red rope instantly stretched to a few meters. Yenyu stopped and seemed to be facing head-on, but when the magic energy approached, he threw a rope and jumped out of his attack range. The blazing fire rope can only bind physical objects and has little effect on magic energy. But as long as it can distract the attention of the demonic energy, that's enough. Yenyu gathered all the spiritual power in his body in his palm, and took advantage of the demonic energy to distract him and jump to his side. He then slapped the demonic heart with a palm. The strong energy wave formed by the confrontation between 2 forces spread around mainly with the demonic heart. Yenyu, who had drained her spiritual power, was blown out by this energy wave and was about to collide with the trunk of a tree. The blazing fire rope grabbed her in time and placed her on the ground. Without the support of the demonic heart, the demonic energy the size of a reef began to dissipate. Yenyugang breathed a sigh of relief as a stone-sized demonic aura collided with her. The blazing rope automatically blocked in front of her, but the demonic aura pierced through it and entered Yenyugang's heart. In an instant, a dull knife seemed to be slowly inserted into the heart, and the intense tearing sensation made Yenyu forget to breathe, leaving beads of sweat as big as beans on his temples. She propped her left hand on the ground and grabbed the position of her heart with her right hand in an attempt to alleviate the pain, but in vain. The pain became increasingly intense, and the heart seemed to fall from a high place. The endless sense of falling made Yenyu's eyes turn black and he fainted. For a moment, Putua's figure appeared beside Yenyu, and the blazing rope was about to launch an attack. He lightly waved his right hand, and the blazing rope remained quietly on Yenyu's wrist. Putua's right hand was suspended at the center of Yenyu's eyebrows, and a white light shone under his hand. Yenyu's furrowed brow due to pain gradually eased. After a while, Putua muttered to himself, "The shackles still haven't been completely broken." After the pain disappeared, Yenyu felt her whole body become very light, as if floating in warm ocean currents. Suddenly, there was a water flow fault ahead, and a sense of weightlessness enveloped her whole body. Yenyu trembled all over and regained consciousness. She rolled her eyes and something kept ticking on one side. Yenyu supported her body with both arms and the people sitting next to her came to help her. "Lu team." The middle-aged man said with a half-smile, "Do you still remember me?" Yenyu didn't answer and asked, "Where is this? Also, what's wrong with this thing? Why is it constantly ringing?" "This is the hospital," Lu replied. "The instrument you're referring to is the electrocardiogram monitor on the adjacent bed." Yenyu turned his head to look, and the patient next door slammed down the curtain. "How are you at the welfare home? Where is that little boy?" Yenyu nodded and answered one of the sentences, "It's okay, we can make do with it." Lu Dui was amused by this mature behavior, which made Yan Yu look inexplicable. She glanced at the tube inserted on the back of her hand, her eyebrows furrowed. Before Lu could stop her, Yan Yu had already used violent means to remove the needle, and soon blood droplets overflowed from the back of her hand. The nurse who was inspecting the ward happened to see this scene and quickly came over to stop Yan Yu's bleeding. She scolded him and said, "Parents don't care. The needle can't be easily pulled out. I don't know. Who is responsible if something happens?" Lu Dui, who was scolded, remained silent, while Yan Yu, who was yelled at, dared not move. The medicine was almost infused, but the nurse didn't insert Yan Yu again. After cleaning the wound, she was informed that she could leave. In the future, parents should take care of their children and not ignore everything. Lu's eyes were moved, and he was stunned for a moment. He agreed and took Yan Yu out of the hospital. Yan Yu could clearly feel Lu's low mood and cautiously asked, "Are you okay?" "It's okay," Lu Zue took a deep breath and regained his composure. "You can take the bus directly to the welfare home. Here's the money for you. I have something else to do at the hospital." Yan Yu, however, was empty. He took Lu's money as a thank you and asked, "How did I come to the hospital?" "I was working in the hospital and happened to see a monk bring you over. He said he picked it up at the entrance of the temple. The doctor said you have low blood sugar and should eat on time." Yan Yu understood and thanked him again before leaving. Lu returned to the hospital and entered the ward. On the way, Yan Yu pondered about the demonic energy entering his body, possibly due to the insufficient power of spiritual power, which prevented the demonic energy from completely dissipating. In theory, people who are invaded by demons will experience mental instability. Her spiritual power is depleted and her body is weak, just like an ordinary child, but she cannot feel the evil energy in her body at all. Is it putuo? Or perhaps, Yan Yu recalled the suffocating pain in his heart before falling into a coma, "Master. What's wrong, child?" The bus driver heard her whisper and asked, "You're getting off, you haven't arrived at the station yet." Yan Yu replied, "No, no, no. Unable to speak, I didn't expect that the next platform would be the welfare home. If I had known it was so close," Yan Yu walked over and wasted $1. After all, in this era, money and spiritual power are equally difficult to obtain. The setting sun is gradually setting, and the glow is fading into the sky. Yan Yu took advantage of the sunset and climbed over the wall into the welfare home. As soon as he landed, Yumagu's voice rang out from behind. "Sorry." Yan Yu was taken aback for a moment. After realizing what he had said, he didn't mind and said, "It's okay, I was also at fault. I didn't think carefully. Anyway, she has decided to borrow Lin Yi's jade." Yan Yuqiao curled her lips and said, "If it's okay, I'll go do my homework." Upon hearing this, Yumagu took a step forward and grabbed her sleeve, hesitating to say, "You, What's wrong?" Looking into Yan Yu's clear and bright eyes, Yumagu let go of his hand and said in a tone without any ups and downs, "It's okay." Yan Yu remembers his only junior brother saying, "Don't ask, don't inquire." Now she felt that this sentence was really good, and immediately stopped lingering and turned around to leave. End of this chapter. Chapter 7, Selection for Sports Games. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7, Selection for Sports Games. It was still early, and Yan Yu finished her homework by herself. After dinner, she sat in the yard looking up at the stars and the moon, then sat cross-legged, feeling the natural atmosphere. The next day, she went to Putua Temple early in the morning but was shut out. After leaving, she continued to run and exercise. Just as it was about to end, she remembered forgetting to call Yumagu together. She secretly told herself that she would definitely do it next time. When she returned to the welfare home, she did not see Yumagu waiting by the wall. It was rare to encounter a situation where the door was open. Yan Yu leisurely entered through the main door and took out his backpack to start studying. Yumagu, who witnessed her entire journey, lowered his head to cover his gloomy expression. Although his heart was extremely afraid of the despair of being abandoned again, he was calm as usual at this moment, only quietly raising the thorn on his body. Yumagu walked into the hall and, amidst the hustle and bustle, he accurately caught the sound of Yenyu flipping through his books and walked slowly over. Yenyu. The reader looked up and felt that Yumagu was a bit strange. What's wrong with you? It's okay, Yumagu frowned slightly, revealing the complexity hidden in the calm. Let's go to school together tomorrow. Yenyu nodded and said, isn't it together every day? Why did you suddenly ask? Yumagu gently shook his head and said, I'm not sure, just ask. You can continue reading. Watching his figure leave alone, Yenyu suddenly understood that perhaps it was the lack of security mentioned in the book, and a familiar feeling surged in her heart. Once upon a time, I walked aimlessly on the bustling imperial city street like Yumagu. If it weren't for the arrival of my master who saved her, she might still be wandering somewhere now. Master. Yenyu seemed to be lost in memories, her gaze becoming distant. On Monday, Yenyu put on his school uniform and came out. Yumagu was already waiting at the door, and the two of them went to the school side by side. Lin Yi, who was one step late, angrily stomped her feet. She stopped chasing and turned back. A car was waiting for her in the yard. Yenyu noticed that Yumagu was very strange today. As soon as she finished school, she took the initiative to practice calligraphy with her and returned to the welfare home to help her with her homework. Although it was the same before, there was an indescribable strangeness. There's nothing wrong with asking. The demonic energy in his body had not yet been dispelled, and Putuo was also nowhere to be found. Yen Yujing set his mind on exercising his physical strength. Every morning, she pulled Yumagu along, and after running, she seemed to practice for a while longer. Yumagu insisted on practicing with her. This made Yenyu feel even more strange, as if Yumagu could be with her. I didn't give her a chance to observe for a few more days. During Wednesday afternoon's physical education class, the teacher informed her that the sports meet was about to begin and that athletes for various events would be selected. Yumagu, what are you going to join? Linny leaned in, I can be a cheerleader to cheer for you. Thank you, I don't need it. Linny walked away regretfully and turned to meet Xiao Pang, who was caught in someone else's welfare home. Xiao Pang smiled and asked softly, Xiao Yi, I'm participating in a high jump competition. Can you cheer me on? Lin Yi looked up and down at him and said without hesitation, can you jump at your weight? Of course, Xiaopang said happily, ignoring the sarcasm in her words. I've been practicing for a long time, and the teacher said I have good jumping ability. Lin Yi frowned irritably and said in a perfunctory tone, whatever, we're not in the same class, so I can't cheer you on. Upon hearing this, Xiaopang returned to his own class feeling disappointed. A physical education teacher has two classes, and at this time, both classes are conducting a selection for the 800m track and field competition together. As a reserve player for the 800m race, Yenyu plans to fish in troubled waters in the team. The girls agreed to run slowly together, and when the whistle sounded, they each marched forward like wild horses running free. In no time, Yenyu arrived at the end. She controlled her speed and ran at the end of the team, successfully being eliminated. Next is the selection for the 1500m track and field competition for male athletes, with Yenyu sitting in the audience and watching Yumagu in the team. From these few days of exercise, Yenyu can see that Yumagu's physical fitness is better than hers. As long as he wants to win, not to mention the selection competition, he can easily win even on the final stage. The familiar whistle sounded, and the boys stared at their race like arrows fired from the strings. The girls stood on the side, shouting and cheering. Yenyu listened a few words, most of whom were supporters of Yumagu. The small playground was incredibly lively, and Yenyu went from being boring to enjoying it. She sat quietly in this harmonious environment on the chair. Consciousness seems to have returned to the immortal sect competition a few years ago, where disciples from various sects used all their skills to compete for the top spot, and the arena was as lively as it is now. Some clever disciples usually set up gambling tables at this time, and Yan Yu's odds have always been the highest. After all, his strength is there. At the end of this immortal gate competition, Yan Yu came to a perfect end with 16 consecutive wins. Thinking of the scene of friends from all directions coming to congratulate and everyone drinking and having fun together, Yan Yuyang raised his lips. However, later on, in order to fulfill my master's last wish and prevent others from being promoted, my friends from all directions became enemies from all directions. Sigh. You have a problem. Why do you laugh and sigh at each other? Yan Yu opened his eyes and his desk mate, who always sleeps during class, looked at her with a frightened expression on his face. The only communication I have had these past few weeks has all come from his yawning, such as at this moment. Yan Yu smiled at him and politely said, "Get out." "I won't." Instead, her desk mate sat down next to her with a raised eyebrow and a mocking expression on her face. "You just ran 800 and crawled as slowly as a turtle. Are your limbs going to deteriorate? For those who lack a mouth," Yan Yu said mercilessly, "there is still room for development after degeneration. Unlike your simple mind with well-developed limbs, your mind is like a bag full of grass." My desk mate stood up angrily and pointed at Yan Yu, saying, "Can you speak?" Yan Yu avoided his fingers and said kindly, "Don't take your fingers at me. My limbs have degenerated and I can easily cripple you. You wait." Putting down this wise saying, the boy angrily left, and Yan Yu looked at his back with disapproval. When her desk mate helped her sign up as a sports meet announcer to make things worse for her, she only thought it was a child's trick. Yan Yu went directly to the teacher after class to quit the project. The teacher in the office held a thermos and asked with a smile, "Why refuse so much? Take a break while playing at the sports meeting." "But teacher, Yan Yu was thinking of speaking when he saw the paper on his desk and a flash of inspiration flashed in his mind. "Participating in this will delay my learning progress." The homeroom teacher was startled, and other teachers next to him laughed and praised Yan Yui's studies. He thought this excuse could fool him, but he didn't expect Class Ren to come up with a set of papers and say to Yan Yu, "Write this paper in 10 minutes, write as much as you can." Yan Yu pondered, thinking that only with high abilities can teachers believe that they are truly studying for the sake of learning. The elementary school exam was not too difficult, she submitted it in less than 10 minutes. Ban Ren reviewed and said, "Not bad, you can even write papers for senior students. It's a good opportunity to relax your nerves and not keep studying all day. Go ahead." "But teacher, Ban Ren smiled and said, "Don't worry, I will arrange your learning progress." At this point, Yan Yu reluctantly left. Thinking of sitting in the sun in a few days, she walked into the classroom dejected. She didn't know that the paper she had just written caused a lot of discussion in the office. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, Prelude to the Sports Games. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8, Prelude to the Sports Games. "Shaoli, you're quite a good student," the other teachers in the office were surprised. "Did your parents enroll in class?" The homeroom teacher shook her head and smiled silently, only she knew the shock and pride in her heart. The selection for the sports meet only took one day, and Yumagu won a spot in the 1500m athletics competition with an absolute advantage, while Yan Yu reluctantly became one of the broadcasters. After school, Yan Yu finished practicing calligraphy and the two of them made an appointment to travel together as usual. Before reaching the bus stop, the small group that had previously bullied Yumagu stood in front of them again. Yumagu grabbed Yan Yu with one hand and stood in front of her in a protective posture, calmly looking at the other side and saying, "What's up? It's been a long time since you guys had the ability to hit me again this time." The arrogant appearance of the boy awakened Yan Yu's memory. She looked around and saw that the small group of 7 people had increased to 13, and the school uniform was not the same. Yan Yu's spiritual power has not been restored, and relying solely on his martial arts skills to solve these people's situations is a waste of time. After all, being small is difficult to defeat. And this is at the school gate, with occasional security guards coming to patrol. She leaned in Magoo's ear and whispered, "I'll count to 3 later, let's run to school together." "Why?" 3. Before Magoo could finish his last word, Yenyu pulled him and ran away, while the bullying group behind him froze for a moment and chased after him. As they rushed past the school gate, the security guard reminisced, "I was so happy when I was a child." When a group of people rushed into the gate from behind, the security guard put on reading glasses and looked at the surveillance outside the school gate with suspicion, thinking something had happened. Yenyu's goal was clear and he headed straight towards the office building, with a small group chasing after him relentlessly until the figure of the teaching director appeared. "What are you running for?" "Hello, teacher." Yenyu stopped and turned his head to look behind him. The teaching director followed her gaze and instantly changed his expression. He frowned and asked, "Zhu Chang, what are you doing here?" The leader of the bullying group, Zhu Chang, has lost his previous arrogance. The fox friends and dog friends just now scattered in confusion, leaving him alone to accept the upcoming storm baptism. "Dad." A word startled Yenyu, and Magoo also showed confusion. "I'll clean you up when I get home." The head teacher turned around and asked, "Are you two okay?" Yenyugang was about to shake his head, and Magoo answered first, "It's okay, teacher." "Let's go first." "Okay, pay attention to safety on the way." In order to prevent encountering those people again, Magoo and Yenyu climbed over the wall for the first time in their lives. "You grab the branch first, put your body down before jumping." Yenyu consciously served as an off-field guide. "Yes, be careful of a stone below. You have a natural talent for climbing over the wall. You can practice more in the future," Yenyu joked, which is equivalent to landing in the Mu Valley. Zhu Chang's father is the teaching director, and if we talk about his bullying, we are likely to offend both of them. Magoo took the initiative to explain his behavior earlier. After all, he paused for a moment, "Tigers are poisonous and do not eat children. It is the nature of parents to protect their children." Yenyu's eyebrows raised, and for a moment she suspected that Magoo had also traveled. After all, the words he said were not something that an 8-year-old child could say. The words of the police officer echoed in my mind. The boy was kidnapped. When I called, my family immediately confirmed that he was dead. Suddenly a little curious and distressed about the growth environment before Magoo. "What are you thinking?" Yenyu's eyes refocused and she replied, "It's nothing." She changed the topic and said, "The sports teacher said the athletes are going to train after school tomorrow." Magoo's mind was in a daze for a moment, and his voice was a bit low. You can leave first tomorrow, don't wait for me." The two were about the same size, and Yenyu turned his head to see his black tea-colored hair swaying with the pace. His eyebrows and eyes were clear but made people feel a faint sense of low, and his fair skin appeared even more red lips and white teeth. The little boy's face was filled with sorrow. The word "good" in Yenyu's mouth went through countless twists and turns, eventually becoming, "It's okay, I'll wait for you." "Really?" Magoo seemed to see the light, and the sudden surprise and happiness in his eyes dispelled the loneliness around him. Yenyu nodded with a smile and said, "When you go for training, I'll wander around the school. It's about time. Let's gather at the school gate and see each other." "Okay." Surrounded by people coming and going, the two did not see each other, keeping a distance behind them, following Lin Yi. Due to the upcoming sports meet, there was only one class the next afternoon, and the reserve athletes were gathered on the playground for training, while the other students were studying on their own in the classroom. Magoo waved at Yenyu and followed the team out of the classroom. Yenyu didn't have time to retract his gaze and saw Lin Yi behind the team. Her expression upon seeing it was quite profound, and Yenyu seemed to have seen the sect elder who had set a trap for her earlier. When she looked over again, all the athletes had already left. Yan Yu moved his elbow and asked his desk mate, what kind of competition is Lin Yi? Zhou Wenyu, who was beaten up due to the announcer incident, reluctantly said, cheerleading team. Yan Yu understood clearly. Athletes from various classes outside the door are gathering, and she is seizing the opportunity to leave amidst the chaos. Last time in the hospital, she thought that if there was a seemingly inexplicable demonic energy coming from herself, but these days she has been thinking more and more wrong. She originally planned to go and see it after school today, but unfortunately, she doesn't have much to do now. She skillfully climbed over the wall and ran towards the hospital according to her memory route. The first time the athletes gathered, it was inevitable that their positions were chaotic. Others were searching for friends and classmates in the team, while Yumagu stood quietly there alone, giving a feeling of standing out from the crowd. Hey, what project are you reporting on? After Zhu Cheng finished asking, the person in front of him waited for half a day but didn't react. His bad intentions suddenly arose and he kicked him. The force was so strong that after Yumagu dodged sideways, he didn't have time to retract and perform a split in public. Laughter echoed around him, and Zhu Cheng became angry with embarrassment. However, his legs had stiffened and he couldn't move. At this moment, Lin Yi came from somewhere and carefully helped him up, with a gentle tone. Brother Zhu Cheng, are you okay? The tearing sensation at the base of his thigh still existed, and Zhu Cheng desperately wanted face and said calmly, it's okay. Yumagu watched coldly as he looked at Zhu Cheng's calm demeanor and looked away disdainfully. He didn't want to entangle, but Zhu Cheng didn't want to lose face in front of the girls. He let go of Lin Yi's hand and took a step forward, thinking he was very cool, saying, yesterday you helped me keep it a secret. I wanted to spare you once, but giving you a chance won't help you either. Zhu Cheng prepared a long line to say, but in the end, it was changed to, get lost. The boy who knew him laughed recklessly and said, Jiangzi, you can quite pretend. They don't even bother to talk to you, ha ha ha. Zhu Cheng became even more embarrassed and angry. He pointed to Yumagu and said, do you dare to bet? I am also in the 1500 m track and field race. If you lose, I will be your father when we meet. How about that? Brother Zhu Cheng, please don't. Before Lin Yi could finish speaking, Yumagu's eyes were filled with coldness. His thin lips parted and he said, go away. Don't provoke me. Surrounding classmates began to coax, and Zhu Cheng, taking advantage of the situation, continued to provoke, why are you afraid? Then you can call me Dad now and I'll listen. End of this chapter. Chapter 9, Magic Chi Entering the Body. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9, Magic Chi Entering the Body. Yumagu suddenly stepped forward and confronted Zhu Cheng with a powerful tone. You lost. If you see me from afar in the future, avoid me and don't appear in front of me. Lin Yi once again dissuaded, Yumagu, don't do it for me. It's a deal, Zhu Cheng said with a successful curl of his lips before finishing his sentence. The two parties involved, immersed in a tense atmosphere, did not listen to what Qin Lin Yi had said. A girl leaned in her ear and asked her about her relationship with these two people. Lin Yi appeared embarrassed, speaking hesitantly, but in her heart, she enjoyed the feeling of being surrounded by the stars. Surrounded by classmates who didn't mind the excitement, they applauded and cheered, creating an atmosphere. The physical education teacher asked inexplicably, what's wrong? A classmate actively explained the agreement just now. Upon hearing this, the physical education teacher looked at the two people in the middle of the crowd. If I remember correctly, the one on the left is a boy, the son of the teaching director. Yan Yu was completely unaware of this. As soon as she entered the hospital, she was treated by the nurse as a lost child with her family. Despite her efforts to explain, the nurse refused to listen at all. Children should be obedient. There are many human traffickers nowadays. If you run away and get lost, you will never see your parents again. Yan Yu looked at the nurse in front of her with a pitiful expression on her face and didn't know how to refute it. Tell my sister, what's your name? The nurse asked gently. Yan Yu didn't want to answer when another nurse walked over and asked in surprise, is this your sister? She's so cute. Cute, I think so too, she said. This little girl may have gotten lost with her family. Can you help me work for a while and I'll take her to the broadcasting room to see if we can find her. In an instant, information about the broadcasting room came to Yan Yu's mind, and she took the nurse's hand and said, Sister, my name is Yan Yu. Okay Yan Yu, the nurse pulled her hand back and walked out, your little face is chubby, why are you so cute? Yan Yu pretended to have a shy smile and didn't speak. The structure of the broadcasting room is similar to what she saw in the book. If she could find Lu Dui through this, she wouldn't have to search for each one. Nurse sister turns on the main power switch and presses the switch. After a sizzling sound of electricity, broadcasts echoed throughout the hospital. Which parent has lost their child, named Yan Yu? Please go to the first floor nurse station to confirm. Notification. Which parent has lost their child, named Yan Yu? Please go to the first floor nurse station to confirm. After watching 3 times, the nurse was about to turn off the microphone. Yan Yu stepped forward and said in a childlike voice, Sister, the person I'm looking for is called Lu Dui, a police officer. Her voice was unobstructed and transmitted through electricity to every corner of the hospital, but unfortunately, Team Lu was not here today. For a while, Yan Yu endured the ravages of the surrounding nurse sisters. Since she promised a nurse to pinch her face, everyone else came with love and various snacks. So much so that now her pockets are filled with snacks and her face is flushed. Excuse me, is Yan Yu here? The weak female voice pulled back the thoughts of the nurses and quickly dispersed when she saw the duty director coming over. The nurse station instantly left Yan Yu, the first nurse, and this patient. Yan Yu jumped off the bench and looked up to observe the pregnant woman lost in thought. Hello, I am Lu's wife, and my husband is not here right now. The woman said and coughed for a while. After seeing the note on her wrist, the nurse frowned and said, the inpatient department is in another building. What are you doing? Forget it, I'll go push the wheelchair. Wait a moment. As soon as she took a step, she remembered something and turned to Yan Yu, saying, is she your family member? Do you know her? Yan Yu had never seen this person, but the demonic aura emanating from the woman's body confirmed her identity. I know her. After confirming multiple times, the nurse ran to push the wheelchair and sent the woman back to the 7th floor of the inpatient department. Most of the people living here have been sentenced to death by doctors. Throughout the entire process, Yan Yu remained silent, listening to the nurse's criticism of women with care. When they arrived at the ward, the nurse ran to communicate with the doctor again. A large group of people came over to examine the woman from head to toe, confirming that there was nothing serious before leaving. Returning to silence, the woman curved her brows and eyes, raised a shallow smile, looked straight at her, and said, your Uncle Lu has gone to work. If you have any difficulties, you can tell me. Yan Yu watched the woman with a strong smile, her hands gently caressing her stomach. She didn't know how to speak and turned her head in silence to look at the lilies on the windowsill. The outside sun was shining brightly, and the lilies on the hospital lawn were still thriving. However, this carefully planted pot had already withered yellow leaves, and even the branches had withered. The woman followed Yan Yu's gaze and said with a smile in her voice, I forgot to water it. I'll water it when Uncle Lu comes back. Yan Yu whispered, it seems like it's too late to water. It can always grow back, the woman said and asked again, did you encounter any difficulties? Yan Yu shook his head and said the words he had planned before. Last time in Lu's team, Uncle Lu lent me 1 yuan to take the bus, and I will repay the money. The woman smiled indulgently and reached out to Yan Yu. Yan Yu tentatively approached, and the woman gently touched her hair with her hand. Don't worry about money at a young age. Study hard and be happy, you know. Yan Yu nodded in agreement and took the opportunity to place his hand on her wrist. The woman's pulse is light, but the demonic energy inside her body is very obvious. The faint demonic energy on Lu's body is likely to come from here. There are always a few moments in life when one's willpower is not firm, and this is the best time for evil energy to invade or fall into a demon. The invading magic energy will feed on the host's essence and spirit. When the host's vitality is exhausted, it is the time when the magic energy breaks through the body and emerges. This type of magic energy has the instinct to transform as long as it is born. This type of thing is different from what Yen Yu encountered in the forest. Most invading demonic energy will gradually disappear as the host regains its will, unless the invading host itself has no desire to survive. Now she is pregnant, and in addition to her magical energy, there is also a fetus absorbing nutrients from her mother's body. If she didn't want to survive, she wouldn't be able to hold on until now. If she wants to survive, the magical energy inside her is unexpectedly strong. The woman looked at Yen Yu's gradually tightening eyebrows and eyes, raised her hand and gently helped her smooth them out. Girls cannot frown, cannot be angry, it is not good for their health. The already calm breathing became disrupted again with the cough, and the woman released her hand resting on Yen Yu's shoulder, covering her mouth. Yen Yu quickly handed over a piece of paper from the side. "Thank you," cough 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 cough. After she took a good breath, Yen Yu asked, "Does your heart hurt?" The woman shook her head and Yen Yu continued, "Do you have a headache?" The woman nodded and said, "It's a bit." Yen Yu doesn't know how deep this slight pain is. The heart and brain are the main gathering places for the body's essence and spirit, and magical energy is bound to linger in these two places. "I know how to massage, can I give it a try?" The woman was stunned for a moment, then accepted Yen Yu's request and said, "Of course you can." End of this chapter. Chapter 10, Agreements. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10, Agreements. The woman lay down, and Yen Yu stood in front of the hospital bed. As soon as her fingers touched her forehead, the magic energy in her body entered Yen Yu's body through her fingertips. Yen Yu was startled and quickly withdrew his hand, interrupting the transmission of magic energy. The woman didn't know, but she said with a hint of relief, "It seems like the head doesn't really hurt that much anymore." The most important thing for cultivators is to recognize the sea. Once invaded by demonic energy, they will directly become demonic. Yen Yu had never encountered such a situation before and quickly conducted internal knowledge. The demonic energy that entered the body swam along the meridians and was about to reach the sea of consciousness. Yen Yu's spiritual power was exhausted and could not be stopped. Strangely, the demonic energy travels straight through the sea of consciousness and reaches the heart, no longer wandering aimlessly. Since entering this world, Yen Yu's heart has been shrouded in white mist, and even his inner consciousness can't see anything. "Yen Yu. Why are you here with this person?" Lu Dui came in from outside the door, holding a box of lunch and fruit in his hand. Yen Yu opened his eyes and hesitated for a moment, forgetting what to say. "She came to you to repay the money," the woman said with a smile, her arms propped up on the bed and about to get up. Lu's team stepped up to support her, and Yen Yu consciously made room for the two of them. "What money?" Yen Yu pulled back his swirling thoughts and answered, "Last time I took the bus, you." "What did I think?" Lu didn't let her continue, "Even if you're healthy and happy, why don't you pay me back? Have you eaten it? I made soup today, let's have some together." The woman also smiled and said, "It's already afternoon, let's have some together." Yen Yu refused, no need, I still have classes." "Goodbye Lu, Uncle Lu, Auntie." The couple's plea to stay was unspoken, and Yen Yu had already run out of the hospital room. Seeing this, the woman still chuckled lightly, but her eyes were full of envy. "Unfortunately," she said, "if only I had the opportunity to watch our children grow up." Lu Dui frowned and said, "What nonsense. I'm sure you can see it. He set up the table that came with the hospital bed and opened the boxed lunch, saying, I made this chicken soup myself. Your husband rarely cooks it, so you must drink it all up. Drinking it all up will make your stomach comfortable. Once you have eaten all the food, you will be ready. The smile on the woman's lips grew stronger, and she coquettishly said, I'm not a child. Lu scooped a spoonful of chicken soup and fed it to her mouth, saying, You're just a child now. Open your mouth, ah. The woman drank chicken soup in unison and thought of Yen Yu's massage just now. She said, This little girl is quite impressive. She said she wanted to give me a massage, but I didn't feel much hands-on. My head doesn't hurt that much anymore. It's amazing. Upon hearing this, Lu suddenly remembered what they had been saying about the red rope when they arrested the fat and thin duo before. Later, the surveillance footage fell off, and the red rope on Yen Yu's wrist really seemed to have vitality. Looking back, from being kidnapped to being rescued, to now, this little girl has always shown an extraordinary level of calmness and transparency. What's wrong with you? Lu's team considered it and said, It's nothing. The woman nodded and suddenly heard Yen Yu, who had just left, say, Go and take a look. Don't let that older child get lost. It's okay, I believe her. At this moment, Yen Yu sat on a bench at the bus stop, watching the cars coming and going in front of him. Her thoughts crawled away like vines, blurry and complex, and her gaze remained calm as she pondered the truth behind the mist. The bus stopped and left, and she remained motionless like a settled monk. Yu Magu, who had finished training, stood at the school gate, gazing with hope at the people coming and going. Wave after wave of students came out of the school, and Yu Magu stood motionless in the most prominent position in the crowd. The parents who pick up and drop off their children at the school gate have almost left, but Yu Magu still hasn't waited for Yen Yu. However, it has been agreed that we will never see each other again. As long as we wait, we will definitely come back. Child, there's no one here. Haven't your parents come yet? Grandpa's security asked. Yu Magu insisted, I'll wait a little longer. Do you want to come in and wait? After standing for so long, have a glass of water. Yu Magu still refused, no need, thank you. The security guard couldn't resist him and went back to the security room on his own. He had just left when Lin Yi, who had finished cheerleading training, came out of school. She thought Yu Magu was waiting for her, but Mu Ran remembered what she had heard from behind the two last time. She walked up and asked, It's so late, Yen Yu hasn't come yet, isn't it a breach of promise? Yu Magu didn't care how she learned about these things, but the hope and happiness in her eyes faded a lot. Lin Yi pursued the victory and said, Why don't I accompany you and wait? No need. Lin Yi sighed and said in T language, If it were me, I wouldn't be willing to make you wait so long. Yu Magu glanced sideways and raised the corner of his mouth, mocking, Have you finished speaking? Lin Yi sighed and instantly looked understanding again, It's okay, you'll know my goodness in the future. Yu Magu, who was originally motionless, heard these words and lifted his foot 2 meters away from her. Lin Yi was not angry either. She walked to the side of the road and opened the gray-white car door, saying, Uncle, wait a moment. I have a classmate. But the dean said they have prepared a dress for you and asked you to come over after school. Just a few minutes, Lin Yi looked at Yu Magu calmly through the window. In a few minutes, I'll be able to pull him along. Unexpectedly, within a minute, the person who had been lost seemed to suddenly see hope, and his whole body became energized. Then, Yen Yu ran from behind to Yu Magu's side. Lin Yi's face flashed with a twisted expression, and the driver was shocked to see this expression through the rearview mirror. He then heard her say, Let's go. Yen Yu, who was lost in thought, forgot the time until the horn kept ringing in front of her. The driver asked her if she wanted to take the last bus. Yen Yu only then realized the passage of time and remembered the agreement with Yu Magu. She said there was no need to rush to school. In the eyes of Mu Gu, Yen Yu rushed over wearing the last glow. As she approached, The sun had already set, and she replaced it with new hope. Sorry, I'm late. How long have you been waiting? Yumagu avoided the heavy and said, it's good to come. Yenyu felt very guilty and kept apologizing, I'm really sorry, I swear, there will never be another time. Let's go. Yumagu concealed his inner satisfaction and walked ahead. In one's lifetime, for the first time, there was a person who rushed with all their might to make an agreement with him. Yumagu is a pessimist, and he dare not show concern for this satisfaction because he is afraid it will be the last time. Yenyu, who had made a mistake first, had a guilty heart and didn't know if Yumagushing was angry. He tentatively asked, why don't I help you with your homework this time? Don't be angry, okay? I used to want someone to be good to me, all I needed was to gain her guilt. Yumagu understood this truth, but also understood to stop when things were good. He replied, okay, but I want to be with you. End of this chapter.